Fill her up.
You're listening to the Gas Digital Network.
Good afternoon, Michael Malice here. Let that be your welcome for the next hour. We have with us a very special guest. This is by popular demand, which I usually try to deny because the masses have no minds. But we have with us Siraj Hashmi, who is creator of The List, co-host of the Habibi Power Hour. My Semitic mouth didn't even say it correctly, so please chastise me accordingly. You are one of the funniest people on Twitter, and you seem to be in a state of constant exasperation by all the banality and just the horrible takes that are on Twitter, which led to your creating of The List. Can you tell me the story? Tell the people what The List is and how you came up with this idea.
So The List is a power ranking of people on Twitter who need their phones taken away based on bad tweets. So think of it like, the reason it started was back in December of 2019, and Kellyanne Conway, who was then the White House advisor to the White House, to President Trump, she tweeted something along the lines about Joe Biden and how, like he was fumbling over his words, and just like he always does. And it was in the midst of the whistleblower Ukraine saga. The impeachment inquiry had already been opened, and Kellyanne Conway tweeted a clip of Joe Biden, and she's like, "We need Ukraine to beat this guy." And George Conway quote tweeted her husband, and said, "Your boss apparently thought so." And I was like, "Whoa, slow down there. Dunking on your wife on a public platform like that, I gotta take your phone." So I basically just created like a 5-person list of people who needed their phones taken away. I had it like it always existed, like a power ranking, like in sports and the ESPN, they do these power rankings. And so I had George Conway at number 1, moving up from number 2. Number 2 was Donald Trump, because he always needed his phone taken away. Then I had I think Seth Mandel, because I like to clown him around because we worked together at the Examiner. I was on it. I think I was like number 4, and then I had like Charlie Kirk or something like that. And I didn't tag any. And I started doing this first I thought it was just going to be a one-time post. And then the next day I was just like, I think I need to do this again. I just did it. And then the next day, when I did it the third time, one of my colleagues at the time, my friend Jason Russell, he's like, "At them, you coward." I was like, "All right, fine. I'll at them the next time."
Yeah, of course.
And I started including their Twitter handles. And then I expanded initially from 5 to 10. And then every time I started doing it, and started writing people's names down with the writing hand emoji, and people started catching on to it. And it got to the point where people started flipping out and freaking out that they were being included on the list with people that they absolutely abhor. So I remember this one case. You might recall, maybe like a couple of weeks after I did that, President Trump at the time had issued an executive order to combat anti-Semitism on college campuses.
Yeah.
And the way the New York Times reported it, it made it look like Trump was changing the Jewish classification to a nationality. So this one writer, Erin Biba is her name, from I think like the Deadspin, the Gizmodo, Kinja.
Oh, didn't she end up deleting her account? I clowned her on something else. She was the one who went after Elon Musk. So let me just interject here. I'm 99% sure we're talking the same person. She is one of, I better be getting the name right, because otherwise I'm throwing the wrong person in the bus. She had 2 tweets. One is she criticized Elon Musk. He replied to her. And then she had a tweet goes, "I'm writing a story about women who have been harassed by Elon Musk fans. Send me your things." So she wrote the article with, first, and then she was looking for evidence to prove her point. And it was only because she personally got her ass handed to her. She is really a bad faith actor. Yeah.
It was so bad. But the reason why she got put on the list is because she had an absolute meltdown in reaction to just this poorly written New York Times report. because Trump did not change Judaism to a nationality, but the way that she kind of amplified this message in this executive order was that basically signaling that Trump was basically starting the next Holocaust. And she tweeted out basically a Wikipedia image or a Wikipedia screenshot of the 1939 Nuremberg laws, and basically insinuating that that all the Jews in America were going to go to camps. I had to put her on the list, and then she flipped the fuck out. By the way, can I swear on here?
Yes, absolutely. Only
Okay.
racial slurs, though.
So she flipped the fuck out, and I think probably the weirdest thing that she flipped out about was the fact that she had been on the list with Stefan Molyneux.
Oh God. Okay.
Tweeted out something insanely weird about Taylor Swift and like being fertile and having babies. It was just the weirdest shit ever. So I put them both on the list, and she like melted down. She like DM'd me basically like a whole diatribe, and I responded to her. I said, this, I'm going to tell you right now, I don't think there's anything I could do to help you. But what has helped me in the past is a quality filter that basically filters out any of the trolls. And she's like, I pour my heart out to you, and this is how you respond. We're done here. And then she blocked me.
You're that brief and bittersweet relationship. It's actually,
hold on, Michael. It gets better. It gets better because about 2 hours after that, Seth Mandel, who again made the very first list, he DM'd me a screenshot of Erin's tweet saying that she's like, I'm logging off for a few days. Like, I've had enough. And I responded to him. I said, the list works.
Yeah.
And that was the inception of the list working. Like she put her phone down. Sure, I may not have it, but she put her phone down, and now she's not going to tweet for a few days.
That's very interesting that we both had encounters with the same, like, obviously, I would guess, I'm not going to put words in your mouth, unwell, horrible, bad faith actor. What's really interesting about the Trump stuff with the Holocaust comparisons, Trump's grandchildren are going to be raised Jewish. His daughter converted, and it's not like this kind of 7-Eleven conversion. She keeps kosher. She keeps the Sabbath. I mean, she did the whole process. And Jared Kushner, of course, being his son-in-law. It's just a very odd phenomenon. What else is interesting, I read in the last year a book called Buried by the Times. And the New York Times actually refused to talk about Hitler targeting the Jews, because then they would be, in their logic, buying into his idea that the Jews were not Germans. So they basically said they're targeting civilians and they're targeting populations, but they pretended it wasn't targeting Jews specifically. That book's called Buried by the Times. It's absolutely phenomenal. Wow. But you could also understand how, since the New York Times then and now was run by the Salzburgers, how they had they're in a very tricky position because they want to criticize Hitler, but then it's gonna be like, oh, this Jewish newspaper's criticizing Hitler. But it's amazing. So here's the other thing. I almost got on the list, and I'm going to defend myself, and let's see if we could have this conversation. Okay.
Of course.
Is it your view that, and there's the what's that principle that the longer a conversation goes on the internet, the sooner someone is going to mention Hitler? Godwin's law. Godwin's law. But Godwin's law also says that not all Nazi comparisons are invalid. There are many examples where the Nazi comparison is perfectly valid. Do you disagree with my contention, and maybe I phrased it poorly, that a large part of the lockdown crisis is about the intentional creation of an outgroup?
It's an interesting thing that you bring up, and it's also fascinating to think about and revisit now, because I'm trying to remember exactly when you tweeted this.
Here, it was like a year ago. And okay. I can see why you would put me on the list. I'm not Aaron, but I had said replace the word coronavirus with Jews, and the behavior of the 1930s German population becomes eerily familiar. That was my tweet, just something like that.
Okay, all right, yeah, no, wow, that's very fascinating to look back on, because it's weird. There are different say different gradients.
Sure, of course.
Everything has been looked upon in a sense of it's very divisive, even more divisive than I think any time under Trump. And it's mainly focused on people's health, something that people never focused on before.
Right.
And that's probably the most insane thing about this. It is people's personal health decisions being put on full display, and you are having to signal your virtue through your health decisions. And if you don't do that, you are cast aside, you are outcast, you are ostracized, you are shamed, you're canceled.
Can't go to a restaurant, can't get a job.
Yeah, I mean, there are ways. I mean, again, I understand what you were trying to say. It could certainly head down in that direction. I am very hesitant because, maybe I'm just an optimistic person overall and like to think, the good in people. I understand, obviously, that's pretty naive of me, given my 34 years of life, understanding how horrible people are.
Yeah.
And specifically how horrible governments, particularly the United States government, is. I'd have to say that if there was a choice to implement the most stringent restrictions and control the people, I would say 9 times out of 10, possibly 10 times out of 10, the government will not say no to doing that. Now, if it has to do with like straight up camps, I mean, look, the United States government has done it before with internment camps in World War II and with German Americans in the First World War. I mean, it's not unheard of. There's precedent for it. So will we head down that direction? God, I mean, I certainly hope not. I mean, the difference between those 2 times and now is that you basically have everybody on social media and you can drive a message out very quickly. And it's very difficult for any government, let alone our government, to cover that shit up.
Hey there, auto mechanics and super cool do-it-yourself guys like myself who work on their own cars just like I do. I want to tell you about rockauto.com. It's the online store with every auto part at the best prices. This is your and my one-stop shop for everything auto parts. Rockauto.com has been in business for 20 years. They make it easy to find the parts you need at the best possible prices. No more talking to counter guys. I hate that. Who need to order your parts, aren't really sure what you're looking for. They never quite have what you need. And after all that hassle, they still charge you storefront markups. But at rockauto.com, you can easily find everything you need. And whether you're a mechanic like myself, an auto shop, or working in your own car like I like to do, everyone has access to the same incredible pricing at rockauto.com. I'm so excited I mispronounced it. So if you're a car guy, right now, go to rockauto.com, check out all the parts available for your car. You're going to have so much fun looking at car parts. I'm speaking from experience here. Once more, go to rockauto.com. They don't need a promo code because their pricing is already that good. And when you order, make sure to tell rockauto.com that you heard them on the driving podcast known as You're Welcome. rockauto.com. Let's get back into it. Yeah, but the other thing what I was trying to speak to, and I think it's exponentially increased since then, and I would bet you agree, is the venom and frothing at the mouth people feel almost obligated to display towards those who are unvaccinated, whereas they understand logically that being vaccinated is not at all proof or evidence that one can't spread COVID. And right. The fact that they're cheering that these people are being driven from polite society, even if, and it doesn't even seem, like with abortion, at least people are making the exceptions for rape or incest. They try to be like, all right, like I get it. But with this, like, there's not even the asterisk of, sometimes the vaccine has side effects. Some person might have had some kind of lung issue, so they don't want to take it, whatever. And these are things that are not medically in dispute. I wish I could say I was surprised. I guess I'm surprised seeing it. I'm not surprised in terms of predicting it, but the vitriol we are seeing toward the unvaccinated, I think is much more or as bad as it had been towards Trump. There is really almost a demand for blood for these people. Like, how dare you, even if you, there's a Twitter account called Very Concerned COVID Parent, and he talks about how, there was an outbreak in Idaho. That's why your son in kindergarten in Brooklyn has to wear a mask. But that seems to be their logic. It's like, if anyone anywhere is unvaccinated, you are threatening my family where I'm not geographically proximate to you, and you should suffer the most severe consequences.
Yeah, it's almost like the fear, and it's a different kind of fear, but it's the fear that a lot of people had after the September 11th terrorist attacks. People in completely remote parts of the country fearing that Muslim terrorists, radical Islamic terrorists, were going to go and attack like their local general store. Like, no, they're not going to do that. Like, right. They're going to go for high population targets, high value targets. And it's actually kind of interesting. The people who lived in those high value targets, like New York City, probably had the least amount of fear of anyone because, hey, we're New Yorkers, get the fuck out of here. Like, that's just like the mentality. We're tough. And I have to say, I take stock in the idea of people waving red flags and say, hey, this is something that's happening that's really bad. It could get a lot worse. Yeah. And I appreciate that, and that's something that maybe looking back on, of course, I've listened to people who have, who've had predictions that have come to fruition. I'm sure yours is something that's probably heading in that direction. And that's unfortunate.
Yeah.
And that's part of, my internal biases, thinking that, oh, we're the United States of America. There's no possible way that we're going to go down to that route. And next thing you know, we're down that route. Yeah. So I'd have to say that when it comes to COVID, and I've talked about this at length quite a bit, it seems as if that the people who are most in fear of COVID, who both are vaccinated and wearing masks, they also are, like trying to govern or rule from the position of if it saves one life.
Right. And
they only take that approach with just COVID. They don't take it with anything else. They don't take it with cars. They don't take it with airplanes. They don't take it with, the flu, cancer. It doesn't matter. If you
drinking,
drinking, smoking cigarettes, drunk driving, that kind of thing. Like, you're obviously, statistically speaking, you're far more likely to die from a car accident than you are from COVID. Just based on last year. I mean, of course, can't based on last year, but statistically speaking, of the people who've gotten COVID. And it's just very troubling that people seem to be, manipulating statistics or cherry picking statistics to fit their own narrative. And they just do not, I feel like they're either out of touch or, and this is another thing I thought of, because Trump's not in office anymore, there has to be another dividing issue that the government has to figure out how to keep the people's attention away from the incompetence and the general, I'd say how negative sentiment that people have towards the government. So in order to do that, you have to divide the people. So what do? You make it about the unvaccinated. Blame them for everything. Blame them for why your children have to wear masks in school. Blame them for why we have to bring vaccine mandates. Blame them for why, you have to show a vaccine passport when you enter a restaurant. Minor inconveniences like that turn into major inconveniences, and you divide the people even further, keeping their attention away from the incompetence and ill will of the government.
Yeah, and then it also becomes the only possible reason this person is being disobedient is because they don't value your life. So why should you value theirs? And It becomes, and especially with social media, which is something I'm broadly speaking in favor of, it's very much geared towards getting people towards the extremes of their logical conclusions. And therefore, they kind of alienate into isolated bubbles that don't interact. So it's very easy to caricature by one group another and vice versa. And I think we're seeing in a very real sense and an escalating degree, the wreckage of the consensus, the idea that there is, historically people always talk about Reagan and Tip O'Neill, who was Speaker of the House, Democrat. They had a big House majorities, even though many of those Southern Democrats were conservative, but that they could get together and work it out. Now that really in many ways seems to be I'm sure behind the scenes they get along a lot better than they'd like us to believe, but publicly, the vitriol, like the Kavanaugh campaign, Trump, both at Trump and from Trump, I think things are reaching levels that we have not really seen, in recent memory. And I think I don't see any mechanism for it to get better.
Yeah, and you always look at the pendulum swing, right?
Right.
It swings far right, say during Trump, and then it swings far left. And what you're seeing right now is the pendulum swing to the far left. And people find that when you have someone like a figure like Trump, a celebrity who had never been in politics before, commented on politics through his decades of being in public life, to then all of a sudden running for president and destroying career politicians, senators, governors, members of Congress, people who have been in this shit for years. That is a sight to behold. The fact that he did that, and the fact that the GOP completely messed that up to sabotage him, I mean, we'll look back on that for years to come, and political scientists will study that for years. But that's the thing that Democrats are trying to replicate, right? You have these politicians, career politicians, who are, maybe they're not nationalists, but they're definitely populists, and they want to bring about radical change, whether it be through these socialist policies that Bernie Sanders proposes, that the squad adopts to bridge that gap between the older and younger generations. And you start getting people who kind of thrive on that celebrity because they understand how Trump marketed himself so well on social media. And you see that through people like AOC, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. She's not a real savvy politician, but she's very savvy on social media. Beyond what she, if she is not running for Senate in 2020, well, when's Schumer's term up? Either 22
next
or
2022. Yeah,
22. If she doesn't run for Senate in 22 against Schumer, try to primary him, she's definitely running for president in 24 when she turns 35. So she knows the path.
I disagree. I think she's running for Rachel Maddow.
You think so?
Oh yeah. There's
Why?
no way there's no way she's going to get elected president. I don't think she's that dumb.
She's not going to get elected president.
I don't think she gets the nod.
I'm saying she's going to try to run, or at least flirt with the idea of running, just because of all the people hyping her up.
You do make a good point, and she might run, and here's why. So I'm an old man, a lot older than you. So what people don't appreciate is in the 70s.
Are you 69 years older than me though?
74. So what people don't appreciate is during the 70s, there was a trio of AOCs in Congress. It was Liz Holtzman from New York, Shirley Chisholm from Harlem, and Bella Abzug from the Lower East Side. And there were these fresh-faced young feminists, and they were going to change the scene. And Shirley Chisholm did run for president. She was the first African-American woman to run for president. But after 6 years, these were all taken and thrown into the trash, and they were yesterday's news. And I think boomer cons, who are kind of the dumbest people in politics, really see AOC as an existential threat. Right. But she knows a lot of people, what people don't appreciate, a lot of people don't run for president to try to be president. They want to get speaking fees. They want to get a book deal. They want to be in the cabinet. They just want to have their chance at the trough.
Elevating the platform. Andrew Yang is a perfect example. Nobody knew who he was before he ran for president. Then he got a CNN contributor gig, and then he ran for mayor of New York City. Lost that, and I'm sure he'll probably, figure out a way to maintain his presence on the commentary scene, because people value his insight. Even though I feel like he really did himself a disservice by running for mayor, because basically he got exposed as basically being someone who doesn't really have any principles.
Right. And the thing is, she would be smart to run president in the sense that she would then have leverage with the nominee and push him in a left-wing direction. So that would be smart and to increase. So that is actually a smart prediction. But I think in terms of primarying Schumer, Chuck Schumer is a mean mother. And I would be terrified to go against him.
But here's the thing. I would have thought that AOC would have run for Schumer's seat until we saw what happened to her last week, in which she basically got bullied by Nancy Pelosi into voting from no to present on the Iron Dome funding. Right. So there's no way she could hack it in a primary race against Schumer. She won't even jump into the race because she would get bullied so hard. She is... As good as she is marketing herself on social media, she's a lightweight. She has been compromise to a lot of people who really believed in her, who believed that she was a socialist progressive who was going to bring actual change. And it turns out, sometimes you drain the swamp, other times the swamp drains you. And it so happens that the latter is happening to AOC.
And I don't know how many years Schumer's been in power in New York from Senate or Congress, whatever, but he's got everyone in his back pocket, every power center in New York State. Whereas
just look at the special election with Nina Turner in Ohio, who's going to replace Marshall Fudge's seat.
Right.
Like, she got beat by a no-name, generic neoliberal Democrat. Like, nobody knows. I don't even remember her name.
Right.
But Nina Turner had like such a massive social media presence, and she lost by, I think, more than double digits to a center left Democrat. So establishment is no joke. Like, they play to win, and they have a better network setup in which they will definitely rally the masses in their favor, even if they don't ever plan to change anything.
Yeah, and they stole the nomination from Bernie. He was ahead in every state on Super Tuesday. Then they hit the phones, and everyone folded and went behind.
Right, but and it was different in 2020 than it was in 2016, because in 2016 you obviously have the DNC emails, so you have the DNC working to conspire in a far dirtier way. At least within 2020, they had all the establishment candidates, the neoliberals, the Amy Klobuchars, the Pete Buttigieg's, all sort of drop out and coalesce behind Joe Biden. And so they basically isolated Elizabeth Warren and Bernie Sanders to kind of fight for that little slice of progressive vote. Hey
guys, we got an interesting new sponsor here that sounds kind of intriguing. Dating apps are terrible, true. They're superficial face swiping apps, and then they're the quote unquote expert matching apps, and they both usually waste your time, true. The solution is values-based matching with our friends at Droom, D-R-O-M. If you're a libertarian, things probably aren't going to work out with someone who's a total statist wearing 6 masks. Same with religion, lifestyle, raising children, other core values. Sure, anybody might change to meet you where you are. Why not find the perfect match from the start? Droom is a new, free, values-based dating app. You pick deal breakers and deal makers. There's no experts. There's no match percentages. You don't have to addictively check. As someone matches your deal breakers or deal makers and you match theirs, you get a notification. This is really smart. If you don't find a deal breaker or deal maker that's important to you, you can add your own. They've even asked my listeners here, you're welcome to create some, so maybe throw some together over on, and we'll get them over to the team. Droom is also video only for more human interactions. So go to drom.date/malice, and then you can install it or use the promo code MALICE to sign up. If you're already matched up, tell your friends and get your partner to tell their friends. That's drom.date/malice. Droom, design and meet your perfect match, and it's free to use. Let's get back to the show. So one of the things that everyone says correctly is that Twitter is not real life, but since you and I seem to live in that aquarium, let me ask you this. I have changed my tune on Jennifer Rubin, okay, who I'm sure has made her appearance on the list.
Hold on. Have you changed it from positive to negative or negative to positive?
Negative to positive.
Okay.
Because
I'm interested to hear this.
The epiphany. I grew up watching WWF. You probably watched WWE.
I did.
She's a heel.
I watched WWF before. I actually dropped out of WWE in like maybe 2002, 2003.
Yeah. So I was watching.
It was largely 2000. I think it switched to WWE in 2002.
Yeah. So she is a heel. She's a wrestling bad guy. It is her job to generate heat from conservatives by saying the exact thing that would upset them, even though 2 years ago she's saying, or 4 years ago, saying the exact opposite. Just like these wrestlers go from I was your best friend and then I carry this team and I'm going to hit you with a steel chair. And she does it very well. And people fall for it every time. And when you look at her in that context, that her job is just to get people agitated and upset, then I do have a grudging respect for her.
Yeah, it's actually very difficult to take on that amount of heat. Like I gotta say, very early on, I was like, there's no way Jennifer Rubin's this dumb. Like,
she's right.
Like, she cannot be that dumb to basically go from complete anti-Obama, anti-Biden conservative to complete Democrat in the span of basically, I'd say less than a year.
At age 70, Trump. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And, it's funny because I obviously jokingly just call her queen of the list because there's so many takes that she's had in which you look at it, you're like, there's nothing that can top this. Like, this is art. Like, it is an
Right.
art form, and she has mastered it. So like, I have a very high bar for Jennifer Rubin to get on the list.
Yeah.
Like, it's got to out Jennifer Rubin the most Jennifer Rubin take. And so like, when people look are like, hey, get Jennifer Rubin on, or why isn't Jennifer Rubin on the list? I was like, have you seen her Twitter? Like,
Yeah.
you know, like you have to basically pick out Picasso after Picasso trying to find that one thing that's like, this is it. This is the gem right here. And the most memorable gem for me, the most Jennifer Rubin tweet I've ever seen is her reply to then Governor Andrew Cuomo, and which was the spaghetti and meatballs. Looks like the girls have eaten their spaghetti and meatballs, and the boyfriend looks nice. Somewhere, something in that order. It was like the boyfriend looks nice, and the girls look like they ate their spaghetti and meatballs. I think that's the exact tweet. It's like, Jen, what the fuck? This is. What are you tweeting?
Right.
It's just man. Goals as fuck right there.
Yeah, she is. Now, are there some people who, when you read it, is just so distasteful, you're like, I can't even find the humor in this. Like, this is just a bad person.
I don't try to judge people based on their tweets, because I mean, look at me.
Yeah.
I tweet. People are very confused about, like my political leanings based on my tweets, because they just cannot pin me down. Although I know a lot of gay men who want to. Anyways, basically, when it comes to Twitter, I'd say the worst person that I've seen oftentimes are the ones who, actually, I know who the worst person on Twitter is. It is Rick Wilson. I'd say Rick Wilson is probably the worst person.
Neo-Confederate Rick Wilson. If you call him a neo-Confederate, he blocks you. Yes.
Yeah, I'd say Rick Wilson might be the worst person on Twitter.
Why would you say that?
I say that because not only is he a grifter, but he is vindictive. He is mean. He takes pleasure in other people's misery. He is not someone who he is someone who lacks empathy for other people, and only wants to advance his own agenda. And that to me is very selfish and self-centered. And I think just every quality that you basically avoid in a person.
Yeah. I was at I talked about this in my book, and you're right. I was at a party in Brooklyn many years ago, and a dinner party. There were like 10 of us around the table. And it turned out it was very diverse in the true sense of the word, not like having one minority in the corner. Everyone was from a different country, every single one of us. So me being me, I went around the table and I said, let's go around, say where we're from, but also who our nationality hates. And everyone just went around, and one girl's like, well, we don't hate anyone. I'm like, who are your neighbors? She goes, oh, we don't hate them. We just think they're dumb. I'm like, yeah, got it. So this is like this is the one thing I do miss about New York. But what is your nationality? Tell me, what is Habibi Bros? How did that come up?
Oh, yeah. Oh, so.
And who do you guys hate?
I love everybody, Habibi. No, I'm kidding. So I was born in Hartford, Connecticut. That's where my mom and her family, they're from the States. My dad is from Pakistan, from Lahore, Pakistan. Grew up there, immigrated to the United States in 1975. He is a heart surgeon, still practicing. He is. Wow. He just turned from. He was 69 at the beginning of the year. Now he's 70. So that's pretty nice. I was very excited. I actually have to say, because of COVID, I wasn't able to celebrate his birthday with him in person, because that is the one true thing that COVID robbed me of, was celebrating my dad's 69th birthday with him. So it's so nice, but so mean at the same time. Yeah. But yes, so I lived in Pakistan for 6 years growing up, on and off, from 1995 to 2001. I've actually written about this extensively, and that my family evacuated Pakistan after 9/11, because we were there during 9/11. And it was because the Taliban and Al-Qaeda in Afghanistan and Pakistan put a bounty on all American heads, basically all foreigners, and we all had to get the fuck out of there. So like 10 days after 9/11, my family and I had to move back to our home in Connecticut, where I did the rest of high school. But that being said, Pakistan hates India
Yeah, very much.
because
Yeah, of course.
yeah,
The
very
valley.
much so.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
mean, I love Indians. I have a lot of Indian friends, but like if you are in Pakistan, you just naturally hate India. Everyone outside of Pakistan, like if you're Pakistani and you meet an Indian, say in England, because that's basically where they all are, or here in the States, it's like a common brotherhood, like and you know, like your family, because like you get to not only do Pakistanis and Indians speak the same language, even though they're called different names. You have Urdu in Pakistan, Hindi in India. They are exactly the same. It's like English between the U.S. and England. The only difference is think of it as like if England had a completely different alphabet, like their entire alphabet was like in Sanskrit, okay? But they spoke all the same words. That's kind of how Urdu and Hindi are. So you can have that common bond through language and through regional, commonalities. But like once you're there, you fucking hate each other. Like you don't want anything to do with them.
See, this is the difference. You're in America. Hold on, just one point. I had a friend who was from Pakistan, but he wasn't born. He was born there, and he did not think the Indians were his brothers. He would go off on them constantly and in very vitriolic ways.
Yeah, no, it's different. It's different when if you're born and raised there versus if you're born and raised anywhere else. Like you look at, like I love Indians with all my heart. There's like my brother is married to an Indian, and my sister is married to a Bangladeshi.
Yeah, yeah.
I'm just so happy to be married to a Jew, so we can have all the different ones that we hate.
Yeah, of course.
So basically, yeah, it's funny because we're just like breaking every barrier right there. You have so. One of the things I have to say, so Habibi is an Arabic word. It means my friend, my dear, my beloved. It's something that Jay, my co-host, and I sort of like started saying to each other online. And Jay's like my best friend. I mean, like it's weird. We weren't friends until maybe like 2018. And then like he and I got along so well because he's also a halfie like me. His mother is from Arkansas, his dad's from Lebanon, and he grew up in both parts of the world. And so like we have that like shared experience of growing up in two different parts of the world and sort of having a Muslim background as well. He doesn't really practice, I do, although I'm sure there are a lot of Muslims who think I'm a bad Muslim, but that's neither here nor there. So Habibi Bros just sort of came about. We just started calling each other that. And yeah, we just started, that's kind of like became a thing. And the Habibi Power Hours started because of the COVID lockdowns. And we just, honestly, we felt so pent up, seeing all this stuff happen and everybody's brains were melting. And we're like, we got to do something.
Yeah.
We're just rotting at home right now. So
Americans tend to think that everyone in the Middle East is the same, or at least it's Israeli versus everybody else, which might be true in a political sense, but not at all. Persians, people from Iran, are extremely racist towards Arabs. There's movies where the Arabs are apes sitting in trees. Is there this animus from people from Pakistan towards people who are Arabic?
Actually, it's the other way around. There's a lot of I would say slave labor of South Asians in the Gulf countries.
Oh, with the passport stuff, that's what they do with the passport stuff? Where they, talk about that.
Think of it. So it's not just Pakistanis, it's Indians, Nepalese, and
Philippines,
Bangladeshis.
and Philippines too. It's very big.
Philippines as well. So think of like several years ago, and we're coming up on it. Like I never thought we'd come up on the 2022 World Cup in Qatar. Okay, we're about a year away from it. And the story on that, when Qatar actually received the rights to host the FIFA World Cup, this is back in like 2014, there were just so many reports of South Asian workers who had died from just intensive manual labor building these stadiums in a tiny ass country that never should have been allowed to host the rights to the World Cup. And it was because of this just rife corruption in FIFA, where you had the president, Sepp Blatter, basically get taken down by the FBI. And even with that, Qatar maintained their rights to host the World Cup. But the U.S. apparently was on the sort of like on a backup. And I'm still very mad about all of that and how that went down. But it sort of exposed, I have obviously I'm very passionate about sports, and so that sort of exposed my or at least exposed my ignorance about how South Asians are treated in the Middle East,
Yeah.
because and actually I gotta say this is even weird too. My dad, who obviously looks very Pakistani, was treated like a second class citizen every time he's gone to Saudi Arabia. So like they just don't dignify him with any respect. And it's sad. And I've seen it happen to his face. The first time I went to Saudi Arabia, it was very eye-opening. It's like they, even if they're both Muslim, there's still a weird dynamic between people from different countries. Like they just don't see them as equals.
Oh, it's like back during the Holocaust time when you had the German Jews and Americanized Jews versus the Eastern European, and it's like we don't need that garbage here. Like we've made it. We're something like you're from the trash. It's often more antagonistic than someone who's from the out group who would be more welcoming and see everyone as kind of equal. It's really disturbing, and especially when you see it that's the thing. Your dad being so high status and like his job is saving lives. To see him basically being like sit at the back of the restaurant and we're not going to give you any service is just like for literally no reason. I'm sure he carries himself extremely well. He
does. And I mean, I know it sounds cliche, but like my dad is the best person. I mean, like best man I know, because he is the one who truly, I'd say, I think he understands me. Out of all, I have 3 siblings. So as a family, 6 of us, he's the only one who really gets me. Besides my wife, of course, but like in my immediate family, he's the one who truly gets me because, he's been there before. He's been an outsider, whether it was through his, ethnic or religious background, even his politics. I mean, he's always maintained sort of a sense of being, moderate. And in Islam, there's a saying that everything, like it's not like an official saying. It's like everything is good in moderation. And so that's kind of how I approached every single thing in life, was like, you can, dabble in different things so long as you don't go overboard. And I think that's kind of how I've also approached politics in general, because I understand that, fighting for one particular side doesn't really do you any justice, especially when the truth is involved. So like if the truth matters, you should, if you really value the truth, then you don't pick a side, you value the truth. And so even if the truth hurts you, you gotta at least, you're at least held accountable to speak it. So
as someone who had to flee the Taliban when you were a kid, I'm very curious, and please expound at length, because this was a long period of several days, if not a week. What was going through your head when you were watching the US withdrawal from Afghanistan and seeing all those people at the airport? Because when I went to North Korea, which was the closest thing I could have done to going to the old historic Soviet Union, it really did a number on me, even though I never lived through any of that, because it's like, holy crap, this is dodging a bullet. And these people are now suffering the fate that I very easily, flip of a coin, this could have been me. So I'm very curious, especially as someone who's raised in America, you're going to have a quite unique perspective on this.
Yeah, I was apoplectic about how everything went down. It was one of the more frustrating things I've seen from maybe any government move besides the invasion of Iraq. That was probably the one thing that probably topped this, because you feel powerless to do anything. The only thing you can really do is to connect with people on the ground to try to get whoever and anyone they know out of that situation. And so I don't really divulge who I talk to, because I'm trying to keep things under wraps, but that has been the only thing I've tried to do. And hopefully, I don't know what the results of those will be, but at least getting people connected so that people who need those resources need that network to try to get people out of there. If I can be a bridge for that, then I'm going to obviously do it. And so luckily I've maintained my contacts in Pakistan pretty well. And I have several friends who have been in the U.S. military who still have contacts on the ground. So the only thing I could really do is just connect those people. And luckily, they've been able to collaborate. So, but besides that, everything was bad. And then it got worse, obviously, when ISIS-K attacked the Kabul International Airport and killed 13 U.S. service members and dozens, I think, what is it, like over 100 or 170 Afghan civilians, killing them. I mean, it's completely reprehensible. Like the fact that like people were cheering the Biden administration on, like he had Malcolm Nance saying, like, tweeting out the hashtag deal with, like, he tweeted something along the lines like, you see what's happening in Afghanistan, this is why we're leaving. And then he wrote the hashtag in that tweet, hashtag deal with it. So insensitive. I mean, completely devoid of any empathy and just sort of reading the room. And this is where, like, I get mad at people like Jennifer Rubin, who also kind of cheerlead this on, who are also the same people who cheerleaded on the government invading Afghanistan and Iraq and probably Libya. But that when you have, the longer you're in this, probably the more cynical you get, because you remember what people said. Exactly. You remember what their positions were, what they advocated for, and people were just kind of new to the game, and they see these things and they're just like they have no recollection of what these people said at the time when they said it. That frustrates me probably even more, because you would think that if people are going to weigh in on something as, polarizing as politics, they'd at least do their fucking research. But like, no, they don't. People are lazy as hell and they don't care. They just want to pop off and get their 2 cents in, or get their dunks in. And the Taliban taking over was obviously very demoralizing, because not only was it just the United States could have withdrawn. And I almost feel like I was lied to, because I have been very adamant about the United States withdrawing from Afghanistan until I saw the actual numbers of how many troops the United States had before the withdrawal. It had 3,000 there, in a country the size of a country as big as Afghanistan. We have more troops in Qatar than we did in Afghanistan. We have more troops in South Korea, more troops in Germany by the thousands. We're not technically at war with Germany. Sure, the United States has never really entered into a peace treaty with North Korea, and so I understand the troop presence there. But like, when you think about that and how the characterization was the United States has been at war for 20 years, like, that's not really the case. Like, yes, the United States had troop presence there, but like, they weren't out there fighting every single day, okay? And the fact that you had even a presence there, that was enough to deter the Taliban from taking over. As soon as you make your plans, as soon as you announce your plans that you're going to be withdrawing, now all of a sudden the Taliban, they're invigorated. They're basically going to rally the troops. They're going to take over the country by storm. And on top of that, when you let something like an ISIS-K terrorist kill 13 U.S. service members and hundreds of other Afghan civilians, all that really does is energize other terrorist organizations. So I hate to say it, but looks like radical Islamic terrorism is back on the menu, boys. And I fucking hate saying that, because I honestly, and I tweeted this around the time that this all happened. I said, people who are too young to remember 9/11, you might find out.
Yeah,
you might.
What was the thing that really got my blood boiling was when they killed those kids, pretending they were ISIS-K, and then basically an aid worker who was giving water, potable water to people, and then they kind of shrugged their shoulders and were like, "Oopsie whoopsie, we killed children." And can you give me perspective from overseas? Does that play as badly there as it does here? Because I would imagine that when you have a country killing kids and then being like, well, we'll send you a check, that doesn't sit well.
Yeah. Now, remember, in the case of like every single scuffle or skirmish between Israel and Hamas, or the Palestinian Authority in Gaza, I remember specifically, I think in 2014, there was a missile strike of a couple kids playing soccer on the beach, and the outrage was severe. but that was international outrage for sure. You might not be seeing it, but I would imagine people in Afghanistan and in the Muslim world are fucking furious over this. This is, I mean, they call America, I mean, at least radical Islamic extremists call America the Great Satan compared to Israel, which is like, I guess, the minor Satan or the Satan Junior. I don't remember the terminology. As you can tell, I'd be a very bad radical Islamic extremist. But on top of that, I mean, it's just, this is nothing new. And the fact that I've actually seen pundits try to dismiss this as something that's nothing new. Like, oh, the United States has always done this, so that's why we're withdrawing. Like, so that makes this shit okay? Really? That's the route we're gonna go down? And the fact that fucking Jen Psaki comes out and says, you know what, the president has dealt with personal loss before, through the death of his son Bo, and the death of his previous wife, and like, we're talking about a fucking drone strike of 7 children, 10 people total, humanitarian worker who was working with the United States, died in cold blood in vain, and no one is being held accountable for it. And you're going to be lecturing us about Joe Biden's personal loss and the loss of his son? Get the fuck out of here. Seriously. It is so insulting how the government talks to people, like just the American people. And, I have never actually hated a president. I think all presidents are bad in one way or another. But the amount of disdain I have for this administration is immeasurable. And that's only because maybe I'm jaded. Maybe it's because you live in the post-Trump world, and everything that we have to look at through the lens of like, oh, this is, if the Trump administration had done this, this is how we would have reacted. Well, Trump drone strike kids, Obama drone strike kids, Bush drone strike kids. And then after drone striking kids enough times, we ended up handing that technology over to the Afghan National Army so that they can drone strike kids. So, yeah, I'm upset. And maybe it's cherry picked because it's been recently reported, and I'm not a huge fan of the Biden administration. And maybe I did not have the same reaction to these certain stories over the last, say, 2 decades. Still, it doesn't make it any better.
Yeah.
Hold on, pause 1 second. I really got to pee.
Go for it. Okay. That's funny.
Sorry about that.
No worries.
Sorry, my bladder was about to my bladder was about to explode right there. Oof.
You're modern day Joe Biden. What else I want to ask you about is what was your reaction when you were seeing the Taliban being trolling on social media and using humor to kind of humanize themselves and for their position?
Yeah, that's a funny question, because that is something that we had never really experienced before until now. Yeah. Is the fact that like the Taliban is memeing. They're trolling us. Yeah. They're posting Sharia, and I know I joke about it, but they're like obviously serious about how like great Sharia law is, and how like they're gonna make women wear burqas, and probably my favorite thing, 2 favorite things. One, they are going to persuade people in the street to not do the certain thing that they're doing and without force. And obviously, you and I both know that the idea of persuasion is literally with a rod and possibly gun or the butt end of a AK-47. And then the second thing is the fact that when the Taliban initially took over, you saw reports about how they were going to combat climate change. Like, are you like this is how they enter our hearts? It's like, oh, we're woke now, we're a new and improved Taliban. Actually, Jay and I did a very good cold open for our show on Habibi Power Hour, in which Jay, so like almost every single Wednesday night episode that we do, which is a live stream, we try to include a cold open. It's just, making a parody, a 5-minute bit like in SNL used to do when it was funny. And when the Taliban took over, Jay dressed in drag as a Taliban spokesperson giving a press conference, and I was basically one of the reporters asking him questions. And of course, I had to like change outfits in the middle of the sketch to ask each individual question. And the entire time is how he was talking about this is the new and improved Taliban, and because he dressed in drag, he had basically an LGBTQ flag behind him and other members of the Taliban sitting behind him, saying that basically the Taliban is new and improved. They are going to combat climate change by basically killing all the infidels. And that's basically how they're going to do it. How are you going to reduce carbon emissions by reducing the amount of people emitting carbon? So that's the Taliban's plan. And then we did a follow-up cold open. And that basically, I was leading into doing an interview, and at the basically the very end of the bit finds that Jay's character who's dressed in drag, Jay's full name is Mujahid. His character name was Mujahideen. And you find, as I'm previewing this interview, it's going to be like a big exclusive, like 60-minute style. I cut to Mujahideen. It's just an image of her with her two legs hanging from the top of the screen.
Oh, Jesus.
Like, it just got dark. It got insanely dark so quick. And that's where we cut the cold open.
But explain because there's so much misinformation out there. Can you explain, as the best of your informed experience, just what is Taliban rule going to mean for the people of Afghanistan?
So, women are treated like second-class citizens to an even more extreme extent than they probably already are in other parts of the Muslim world. There's no such thing as right to free speech, free press, even free assembly. Just think of it as like martial law, where the top of the hierarchy is all men, and the bottom is basically all women and infidels. At least if you are a non-Muslim man, you're probably treated better than a Muslim woman.
Okay.
That being said, like, you be treated better in the sense that like you will be a hostage to them for ransom in the hopes that they will get some money. But they preach about like, getting close. No, they don't preach anything about religion. It's all about like ruling under the guise of Islam and theocratic, autocratic regimes. We've seen them before. We've seen them in Iran. We've seen them in other parts of. You see them in Saudi Arabia, where basically. And I actually fear about going to Saudi Arabia because I got to do the Hajj at least one time in my life. I'm afraid I might get arrested if I ever go. But, to give you an idea of the Taliban, like, there is just going to be, like, I feel terrible for women up there. And what makes it even worse is on the heels of this whole Taliban takeover, you had the Texas state legislature and governor passed an abortion law, and the immediate response from pro-choice, pro-abortion advocates was the Taliban is here in the United States. Might be even more insulting than Jen Psaki telling Americans that President Biden had experienced loss, and that's why he takes this drone strike very seriously. yet nobody's being held accountable. Like that is like something that really infuriates me, because as soon as you start comparing stuff to not only just the Taliban, but sort of Islam at large, to make it look like actually your tolerance of Muslims is based on you trying to corral their vote, not based on like whether you actually agree with them on their way of life or not. And so their idea, and you see this from the left time and time again, you know, they say this is Christian Sharia. This is the Texas Taliban.
January 6th was the same thing as Afghanistan. Yeah.
Yeah. January 6th is the same as 9/11. Like everything that they try to compare, it's becoming, honestly, like there's going to be a term for it eventually, like Godwin's law, like we were talking about before earlier. Like it's just going to be, oh, everything is going to be just as bad, if not worse than 9/11. Like, no, if you weren't alive during 9/11, then I will at least excuse your ignorance. But if you were, then I can just cast you as being a bad faith actor who's only trying to advance a political agenda, because there are people, and this isn't actually discussed enough, there's still people locked up from non-violent offenders, locked up in prison, solitary confinement, for simply storming the Capitol on January 6th. And they haven't even faced charges. That is literally what we're doing, what we did in Guantanamo Bay after the invasions of both Afghanistan and Iraq. There were so many enemy combatants who were either taken by the U.S. military or by, say, CIA agents on the ground, put into Guantanamo Bay, never faced charges, never faced trial, and there's still a bunch of them there. Like, how are we letting this shit happen? And we're letting this happen to American citizens. Where's their right to a free and speedy trial?
Did you know,
or fair and speedy trial?
The CIA didn't know how to torture people in Guantanamo, so they had to look up KGB manuals to give them tips. And for people who don't appreciate what the CIA did to people in Guantanamo who are not at all Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, there were plenty of people who were caught who they were just maybe had the same name or something like that, certainly not demonstrated to be some kind of terrorist masterminds. Like they would force feed them anally, like just all sorts of things that like, what purpose is this serving? None of them had any information. The argument always is, you have a MacGyver situation, a 60-minute situation, whatever it is, where the guy knows 9/11 is going to happen in the next 5 minutes. And if we don't get him to tell you the secret code to defuse the bomb, New York's going to wipe the face of the earth. These people have been there for decades. They have not been communicating with anyone. There's no information that is imminent at all. And torturing them, it becomes very, very hard on an international scale when we're torturing people who are detained without trial, to be like, well, you shouldn't be torturing Americans or people who helped us in Afghanistan. That argument is a very weak argument to make, even if you're going to excuse waterboarding Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, who was certainly involved in 9/11 and whose life does not really have much meaning for me, to put it mildly.
Yeah, I mean, like, just even the fact that like we're torturing even the people who were involved in 9/11, I mean, it makes you scratch your head, like, what, you know, just to show others what we're capable, or at least the CIA is capable of. And ultimately, every time something like this happens, the United States government gets into the position of, oh, we're better than that. We don't torture our prisoners. No, I remember the Bush administration specifically saying this. And I spent so many years my upbringing being just angry at politicians, being angry at the Bush administration, and then naively thinking that Barack Obama could just change it all. And so my very first election was in 2008, which I could vote. And I voted for Barack Obama. I voted for him again in 2012. And I naively thought things would be better with Hillary Clinton in office over Donald Trump. So I voted for Hillary. And then since then, I realized how big of an idiot I was, because Democrats don't care about me. They only care about power, and Republicans don't even pretend to care. And so I'm just going to be like, fuck everybody, fuck every politician. I'm just going to dunk on everybody and expose them for the frauds that they are, the hypocrites that they are. And, I think everybody has some way or another has some sort of realization or epiphany that hopefully, some people never do.
Yeah.
Some people will always be sheep. But I think anybody with, even a hint of critical thinking skills or a hint of, common sense starts to see what's going on, understands that there's something amiss, and realizes the root cause of the problem. And, I think it takes, maybe years of seeing this stuff unfold and then learning the lessons of, say, like political comedians, because one of the best ways that I don't know about you, Michael, but one of the best ways that I at least consume media and at least consume some commentary is through listening to funny people, comedians, podcasters, you name it, people who are able to make a mockery of the whole situation. And I don't really see myself as funny. I always try to just be ridiculous. And if people find it funny, great. But I would like to at least convey a more palatable commentary or analysis to somebody about politics to help them understand how things are so fucked.
Yeah. And Ben Burgess, who's writes for Jacobin, he's a hard leftist. He's been on with comic Dave Smith. He had this tweet this morning. I wasn't aware of this, that Liz Cheney, who, one reason I bring her up is I'm sure you're as happy as I am by how much Republicans despise this warmonger aspect within their party and how this real animus they have toward her. She came out against gay marriage, even though her sister Mary is a lesbian married to a woman, at a time when her dad, who all of us can understand, if you're an older generation, they just think gay marriage is a non-starter, I'm not for it. You can wrap your head around it. It's like, okay, I get it. But even he had the courage, or at least the honesty to be like, I'm for this, this is my daughter. So she denounced gay marriage then. They stopped talking. And now she's like, oh, oops, it was a mistake. I'm for it. And he had the tweets like, what kind of a human being are you that you would just exploit this issue, when it furthers your politics then and it furthers your politics now? If it's your sister, just keep your mouth shut. There's plenty of people who are closet cases who are they don't talk about these issues, but you are really a sick, evil individual. And again, it's even within your own family. You're not if your own dad had the press of mind to do this, who are you?
Yeah, I actually did not see that. That's the very first time I'm learning about it. But that, I'm not surprised, honestly. I mean, Liz Cheney's a snake, and I'm glad that the one good thing about Republicans right now is that they are, sure, maybe this pivot to certain brands of nationalism can get into dangerous territory, but ultimately, them purging the warmongers from their party is a net positive and a net good, I think, for the country. And it's weird because I grew up hating Republicans. Now most of my friends are Republicans. And even then, they're not even Republicans. They're just right-leaning or conservative or nationalists, and they care about the country. And I've seen in the ways that they express that they care about the country, because sure, there are things like immigration or trade or, pick your topic, that when you put it into specific terms, makes sense, because the ultimate goal is to protect the people who already live in this country.
Yeah.
If you're selling out American values to, say, drive a profit, say corporate profits, because obviously corporations prefer mass immigration, because it helps their bottom line, they can recruit low skilled labor, and it hurts Americans overall, because whether you talk about, say, sure, maybe there aren't that many Americans who would take a job picking in a farm somewhere. But it's not even say immigration that's illegal. If we're talking legal immigration, say through the H-1B visas, and how American companies, well, I would call them global corporations now because they don't really serve the American interest. Global corporations located in the United States now are trying to hire or outsource or try to hire foreign labor to come to the United States over American labor.
Yeah.
Simply because they either can work cheaper, they can hold them basically under their thumb by, promising them green cards, promising them citizenship down
to the
below.
company. Yeah,
exactly. So you see, again, like a similar situation as to do with Qatar and South Asians. And they're doing it to the detriment of American workers. And there's no logical sense to keep doing that. So for that reason, I would say I've become a little bit more, I wouldn't say radicalized, but definitely more cognizant of the nationalist argument for having stronger immigration laws, because it has hurt more people than it's helped.
Siraj, we're running out of time. What has been your favorite part of this interview?
I'd say my favorite part of the interview is you calling me funny. I never thought that was a huge honor. It's weird because, Michael, I have no idea how I got here. I have zero idea.
None of us do. None of us do.
Most of us do, yeah. But seriously, how the fuck is this even happening right now? We're collaborating on a podcast, and shit, I am saying words to your viewers and audience, and it's still surreal to me. So this whole experience has been surreal, and so I wouldn't say the very first part of it. I'd say the whole thing's been my favorite.
You are welcome.